They call it pink gold. Potash is a vital ingredient for growing food, and Canada has more of it than anywhere else in the world, with the largest reserves and production volume. It's now being touted as a secret weapon in this trade war with the United States.
U.S. President Donald Trump threatened Canada with, quote, severe fertilizer tariffs.
Tensions between Canada and the United States. U.S. President Donald Trump has abruptly reversed course on a new trade relationship between Canada and China. Trump had previously supported the recently signed deal, but now he's making fresh tariff threats.
America thought it could pressure Canada, but it quickly learned the truth. Farms across the U.S. depend heavily on Canadian potash, and without it, food costs and farming problems could explode fast. While the U.S. struggles to find answers, Canada holds the power, proving just how important its resources really are. The Trump administration confirmed that 25% tariffs on Canadian imports, including potash, would go into effect. Within days, the United States Department of Agriculture Secretary was publicly floating exemptions and carve-outs for potash specifically, describing the status as to be determined. That scramble happened because of a single documented fact. Canada provides around 80% of U.S. potash supply, and the country currently has few alternative sources to which it can turn, compounded by no significant domestic production. 1. U.S. fertilizer prices would spike immediately. CRU forecasts granular MOP prices in the U.S. Midwest to rise much more quickly than those in other markets. By August 2025, CRU expected the U.S. FOB Midwest benchmark to be $65 per ton higher than it was at the end of February, nearly double the increase projected in the competing granular market. Brazil, that was from a 25% tariff, not a full supply cutoff. A complete cessation of Canadian shipments, which typically deliver more than 7 million tons annually to the US market, would produce a price shock of a different magnitude. Canada's largest producers, Nutrien and Mosaic, have indicated they would attempt to pass tariff costs to American farmers. In a full cutoff scenario, there is no price adjustment available that keeps the product accessible. The supply simply is not there from alternative sources at scale. 2. US agriculture would face an immediate planting crisis. Potash is not a discretionary agricultural input. It is applied to virtually all major American crops: corn, wheat, soybeans, cotton, and most fruit and vegetable production. Potassium deficiency reduces yields, weakens plant resistance to drought and disease, and degrades soil structure over successive seasons. American farmers cannot substitute a different product for potash because no functionally equivalent alternative exists at agricultural scale. A supply interruption timed to planting season, which begins in the Midwest in April and May, would force farmers to choose between planting without adequate fertilization or not planting at all. 3. Food prices would rise across North America. Fertilizer costs represent a significant component of total crop production cost. When potash prices spiked by approximately $400 per ton during the 2021 to 2022 global fertilizer crisis, driven by sanctions on Belarus and supply disruptions from Russia and Ukraine, food commodity prices followed. The World Bank documented that soaring fertilizer prices in that period added inflationary pressure across food systems, with the effects falling most heavily on lower-income households spending a higher share of income on food. A Canadian potash supply cutoff would produce a faster and sharper version of the same dynamic concentrated in North American market. 4. American farmers would bear the immediate financial burden. Nutrien CEO Ken Seitz stated from the company's 2024 Q4 earnings call, the tariff cost and tariff impact will be passed on to the US farmer. Under a full cutoff scenario, there is no tariff cost to pass on. There is simply no product available. Farmers who had contracted for potash deliveries would face either contractual disputes or sourcing from alternative suppliers at spot market premiums. American farm economics in 2026 are already compressed by the trade war's impact on export markets for grain and soybeans. Additional input cost spikes without compensating commodity price increases would produce financial losses across a large portion of the US farm sector. 5. The only alternative suppliers carry geopolitical risk. The remaining 15 to 25% of annual US potash supply comes from a combination of a small amount of domestic production in New Mexico and Utah by Intrepid Potash, and most importantly from overseas producers, such as Russia, Israel, and, until 2022, Belarus. Combined offshore imports into the US have rarely surpassed 2 million tons per year, limited in comparison to the more than 7 million tons per year typically delivered from Canada. Russia and Belarus together control a substantial share of global potash production. Russia's export capacity is complicated by sanctions and geopolitical conditions. The Trump administration lifted sanctions on Belarus's state-owned potash producer, Belaruskali, in 2025, but negotiations for a $3 billion mine purchase from President Lukashenko have not concluded. Replacing Canadian supply with Russian or Belarusian supply would transfer agricultural dependence from a democratic ally to a Russian-aligned authoritarian state. 6. Domestic US production cannot scale quickly. Potash deposits are geologically specific. The United States has limited commercially viable reserves, concentrated in New Mexico and Utah, and currently produces a fraction of domestic demand. The Fertilizer Institute, the leading US industry lobby, has stated explicitly that mine development in the United States is time-intensive and costly. Building a new potash mine from exploration through permitting, environmental review, construction, and initial production takes a minimum of 7 to 10 years under favorable conditions. There is no domestic supply response available on any timeline that would address a near-term cutoff. 7. Global potash markets would tighten. Canada accounts for nearly 2/5 of global potash exports, shipping more than 22 million tons annually. A redirection of Canadian supply away from the US market would create competitive pressure for Canadian product among other global buyers, including China, India, Brazil, and Southeast Asian agricultural importers. Countries that currently receive Canadian potash through the Campotex export marketing system and negotiated contract prices would face increased competition from American buyers attempting to source supply through offshore channels, tightening global availability and pushing international prices higher. 8. China and India would benefit from redirected Canadian supply. Canadian producers redirecting volumes away from American buyers would logically seek replacement markets among the world's largest agricultural economies. China and India are both massive potash importers and represent established customers for Canadian supply through Campotex. Additional Canadian tons redirected toward Asia would strengthen those commercial relationships and accelerate the pricing shift from American WTI-linked contracts toward Asian market benchmarks, the same dynamic that Trans Mountain has produced for Canadian crude oil exports. 9. The CUSMA negotiation leverage would shift dramatically. The July 1st CUSMA review deadline approaches, with both sides preparing their negotiating positions. The documented potash dependency, 80% of American supply from a single trading partner, is the most acute single commodity leverage point Canada holds in that negotiation. A supply interruption, even a temporary one, would demonstrate to American agricultural states what the trade conflict costs their farmers in concrete dollar terms. Josh Linville, Vice President of Fertilizer at StoneX, stated the constraint directly. If the US upsets Canada, where else around the world do you start to go? Our second biggest supplier. That's Russia. 10. The long-term consequence would be accelerated Canadian export diversification. BHP's Jansen mine in Saskatchewan is projected to increase Canadian potash production capacity by 40% once fully operational in 2029. That additional capacity, combined with existing supply from Nutrien, Mosaic, Compass Minerals, and K+S, would give Canada more product to redirect toward Asian and European buyers who face no supply disruption risk from American trade policy decisions. Every ton of Canadian potash that secures a long-term contract with a non-American buyer is a ton that reduces Canadian vulnerability to American market dependence and reduces the structural leverage that American buyers historically held over Canadian pricing. The cutoff scenario that American agricultural interests fear most is simultaneously the scenario that would most accelerate the permanent restructuring of Canadian potash export markets away from American dependence.